So Lecrae,
Indeed, yes.
you're here at the Blaze newsroom,
I am here.
and you had the #1 album in America on Billboard 200.
That's what they tell me.
So, and I have a million things to ask you, but I guess we have to lead with that, right? Because that's huge.
Sure.
And so you see that headline comes through. I'm sure your team tells you about it. And what are you thinking?
I literally was kind of like, I think I wanted to manage my expectations. So it was a sense of like, I don't want to like embrace that that's a reality unless it's a reality. So it happened. And I mean, at first it was probably a little anticlimactic. You know, it was kind of like nothing happened. The room didn't change.
Did you go to billboard.com where you're like, let me go look, like I need to see this?
No, my phone just lit up. It was just text messages and stuff, and so you know, there's all kind of industry insider people who find out stuff before, you know, like,
right.
Here, this is it.
Yeah.
And so, but I was excited though because it wasn't about winning a competition or a race for me as much as it was very telling. It said a lot about what it takes to, you know, for the industry, like without a chart-topping single on the radio, without having to sacrifice my morality or my faith, this is still a reality, and I think that's a message for a lot of people.
What do you think it is that, I mean, I'm sure there's a million factors, but what was it for this album, for Anomaly, that actually got it to #1? What do you think it was?
I mean, it was definitely the fans. You know, it was definitely the sense of, I think, people standing behind what they believed in, because it wasn't for my fans, it was a win for them. It was a win for the culture. It was a win for, you know, a lot of parents with raising children who want something on the radio that they can champion and feel like, yes, this is what I don't mind, you know, playing in my home. So I think it was bigger than Lecrae, you know, and I love his music. Even though I'm sure there's people like that, I think it was more about this is a win for us, you know.
And you're very humble. I mean, you're being humble right now while you're talking about this, right? So you have the #1 album, and you have all this success. You have a ton of fans. How do you stay humble? How does that happen for Lecrae?
What I've had to learn is that it's really a pursuit. You know, it's like a daily pursuit. It's not something, you don't wake up humble. You know, you don't wake up disciplined. You don't wake up gracious. You know, this is a pursuit, and you fight for, you know, you fight for a right frame of mind every day. And so for me, it's you know, having people in my life who can constantly remind me of the realities that I exist in, having a wife who's not impressed with me by any means.
That's always good, right?
Right. She's like, oh, Billboard #1, great, take out the trash.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
do the chores.
Yeah, and I think, and just remembering, you know, for me personally, it's just remembering that ultimately God did it. It wasn't me, so. Yeah.
And you know, you talk about the culture before, right, and how it's a victory for culture. What message do you think this sends, you know, not only to sort of the secular world, because I think that's the bigger piece of it, but also to the Christian music world?
I think it's a little dual there as well. So a dual message there. I think you have some artists, you know, believers who are artists who have wrestled with, how do I have to choose a side? Do I have to choose, you know, making secular mainstream, or do I make, you know, faith-based music? And I think it just encouraged them to be honest about what they believe in, be honest about who they are. Don't compromise your values or your morals, but maybe you don't have to make worship music. Just make good music that expresses, you know, who you are and what you believe. And then I think also on the other side of that, just for the listener, it said that it just says that, man, you know, there are people like me who can be themselves and not be concerned about being accepted and embraced, and still be effective and you know, demonstrate that, you know, their significance in culture and society.
And how do you not compromise values, right? Because I think that's the biggest piece of the puzzle for everybody. There's so many people who go out there in the secular world especially, oh, we're Christians, we're believers, and then, you know, 10 minutes later you sort of have them doing things that people are questioning.
Right.
And Christians can be harsh, you know, critics sometimes. Yeah. But how do you not cross that line?
I'm an interesting, for lack of a better term, I'm an anomaly.
Plug in the album there.
Right.
That's good.
I am an anomaly in that this is not new. This is not like an overnight thing. So it's been a constant ride for me. And historically, you know, I've been grounded in great community, great people, you know, who have really kind of hewed out the character that I need to be walking in. And not to say I'm perfect by any means, but my values were just established so long ago that this is not mesmerizing to me. It's almost kind of like, oh, okay, cool. So this is great.
Well, you're also mission driven too. I mean, you
Very
have a
much so.
nonprofit, right? Reach Life
Yep.
Ministries. So you have a nonprofit, you have your record label, Reach Records. So you're existing in a different world. It's not just that I'm here to make money and that's
right.
it.
Right, definitely. So, and that's a huge part of it. You know, that's where the value-driven piece is the platform does not give me significance. The platform for me is a place for me to use the gifts and the talents that I have to talk about something bigger and greater, and to help people see that there's more than just all of the kind of frivolous things that the music industry and the entertainment industry throws at us on a regular basis.
And what do you do through Reach Life? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, Reach Life was established initially to provide resources, curriculum, and tools for people in, you know, disenfranchised communities, specifically the urban community, because there weren't a lot of those kind of resources available to them. And so that's how we started, just creating tools and resources, curriculum, and we did a lot of those things. Our most recent piece that we developed was a piece called Man Up, which basically you know, talked about responsibility, authority, not being passive, you know, and just really kind of creating some pieces for young men who probably don't have father figures or good role models, what it means to be a man. But more recently, we're involved in trying to establish a school in some of the worst areas in the country, immediately with Atlanta, and so right now that's kind of where we're pushing for is a school in one of the worst areas that really.
A high school or?
Well, we're going to start with you know, early education, up, you know, maybe the first grade, and then every year just kind of
Sort of like a
building.
charter school model where
Yeah.
you start to add to it.
Absolutely. So.
Wow, that's amazing. That's a big undertaking.
Yeah, well, you know, we're more supporting. There's a wonderful guy there, Benjamin Willis, who has really, you know, this is his vision and his dream, and we're just kind of coming alongside him and saying, man, how can we serve you in this capacity? Because we want to see this happen as well. We believe education is huge.
And you you live in this world, you know, getting back to the music a little bit, and it's a difficult world, I would imagine, right? Because you're doing hip hop rap, which
Yeah.
is not traditionally something that a lot of Christians have been used to, right? So you have that barrier. Then you have sort of the faith-based barrier of, you know, being sort of an independent label that you've started versus this massive sort of music industry. So you kind of have it coming from two different ends.
Right.
How do you navigate that? I mean, you figured out how to do it, obviously, but
Yeah.
how do you do it?
You know, the first place I had to come to realize was that there's not really a model. And so after I became comfortable with that, then I started to look at different individuals and kind of pull some things that have worked for them. And, you know, so for an example, you know, you look at Dr. Martin Luther King and you say, okay, here's an individual who was definitely very faith-oriented, but yet still involved with social issues and society. And you say, okay, what did that look like, you know, for him specifically? And is there anything I can learn there and take from that? And that's kind of the process that I've had to go through.
And what do you think, I mean, I guess what's the biggest difficulty dealing with sort of the Christian market with, you know, rap and hip hop? Because again, not used to it. It's sort of, I mean, there have been lots of artists out there, but not who do sort of what you guys do and what you do.
Yeah, total anomaly.
Yeah. This is good. You've got a great pattern going here.
Yeah, it's different, and we recognize that for the hip hop world, it's different. It's what is this? How do you do this? Like, we've never seen this. And most people, when you sit down with them, they poke at you and they want to say, oh, so what are you real? Do you ever curse? You know, it's just, they just don't know. They've had zero experience with someone, you know, like you. And then on the Christian side of things, it's like, so what? So you rap, So like, how does that work? Like, do you like Yo-Yo Jesus or like, and people are just trying to wrap their minds around it. But it's really just a new category, and we're creating categories in people's minds for them to be able to navigate through all that we're about.
And you're bridging divides too, right? You're reaching people who might not be Christians with music they can listen to without feeling like they're being beaten over the head
Sure.
with a Bible, right?
Sure.
And I think, you know, that's the difficult thing that people are trying to figure out in Hollywood right now, in music.
Yeah.
How do we produce these things that Christians will love, but that people can also, who aren't Christians, enjoy?
Absolutely.
And how do you do that with the lyrics? And what's sort of your method?
You know what I think has really stifled a lot of art that Christians produce is that Christians historically love to give answers instead of creating great questions. And so, you know, my generation, we grew up afraid of quicksand because the art in the film world, you know, told us that quicksand was going to get us, or Jaws. We're scared of sharks and quicksand. I'm just perpetually scared of sharks
It's
and
so
quicksand.
true. I remember being afraid of quicksand as a
Exactly.
kid. I totally remember that.
And it's not because someone beat you over the head and said, quicksand's bad, stay away from it. But they told great stories that created questions in your mind and make you say, whoa, how do I escape quicksand? What did Indiana Jones
And how do I avoid
do?
it totally? Because I want nothing to do with quicksand.
Exactly. And so now you got a demographic or generation who's afraid of a zombie apocalypse. And it's not because someone told them the zombies are coming and you got to stay away from them, but it's because great stories were told and questions were raised. And I think as Christians start creating art that tells great stories and raises great questions, then the art can be appreciated, and it'll drive people to come to some of the conclusions that we're hoping that they come to. Like, I mean, you want to be afraid of Jaws. I'm scared of sharks now. Jaws did it. You know what I mean? And you didn't have to.
You didn't have to keep saying it over and over again.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's a way to do it without.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I think for decades that maybe that has been one of the problems that's plagued you know, Christianity and Christian art.
Yeah, I would say so.
So let's talk a little bit about your childhood and your upbringing, right? Because that obviously has some formative pieces in sort of what you're doing now and who you are now.
Sure.
What was it for you that led you towards music?
You know, music was just always a part of my household. My mother was consistently playing music. She played music to clean up. She played music to go to sleep. I mean, it was just, that was the ritual. And then my cousins were big into hip hop. And so as I was a little kid, you know, hip hop was always just playing in the house. And it was just a part of our world. And I just gravitated toward it. Yeah.
And are there specific events that you can think of sort of in your childhood? Because I know it wasn't until your later teen years, right, that you became a Christian and really devoted your life. Are there specific events you sort of think back to in your childhood where you're like, gosh, I'm really glad I made it through that, or that was a really bad decision that, you know.
Oh my gosh.
Are there any events like that you can think of that were pivotal?
Oh man, I can think of plenty.
Share some of them with us.
Yeah. You know what's funny is like you grow up and your values, my values were just twisted, you know, and I don't blame anyone, any mentor or leader I had, but my values were twisted. You know, most people's values were my ideals. So college is a lot of people's value. It was an ideal, like, oh yeah, college. A value for me was, man, that guy on the corner looks like a gangster. I want to be like that. And that was a real value. So for you to tell me that he's wrong and that's not okay it didn't make sense to my brain. And so a lot of the delinquent behavior that I exhibited was me really just trying to step into the shoes of being a man. You know, when I'm lighting trash cans on fire around the community in the neighborhood, it's really just me trying to feel a sense of taking control over something. And,
right.
And you know, but yeah, I think I think of plenty of stories. I mean, one story that I know is pretty well told is me grabbing a BB gun that looked like a real gun at the time, and just pointing it at a woman's car, and as she's driving down the street, and you know, it's just crazy to think about, you know, that whatever was going on in my mind thought that was okay.
What was it that, you know, looking back, what do you think sort of led you to think that it was okay? Because there's lots of people today, young people, who think that that sort of thing is okay.
Yeah.
For you, what was it that enabled that?
I mean, you know, a lot of it is probably, I'm sure there's some systemic issues, systemic, you know, historical stuff that probably predates me, that was just instilled in me and my culture, society, and the community. that I had to shake off. But when most of your role models or the people that you admire or look up to, and you got to think about, in my generation, there were no African American leaders that I saw that were like, yeah, I want to be like that guy. The people that were put in front of me were, a 24-year-old Tupac Shakur, and I mean, that's the most intelligent, brightest person I have, and he's 24 years old. He doesn't even really know what he's doing with his life. And so those are people I had to emulate and to be like. And so that was kind of the way I derived my sense of like what's valuable, what's not valuable, what's good, what's bad in a lot of ways.
And does that, for you, I mean, for so many people, you are that person now, right, that they're looking up to. And what does it feel like to know that, and how does that inform sort of how you operate and how you, conduct your career?
One, it is really trying to make sure that you are vulnerable, transparent, functioning in humility so that people can realize that you don't think you have all the answers and you don't think you have it all together. I tell people all the time, my central message is I'm weak and I admit I need a savior. I'm not a Christian because I'm strong, I have it all together. I'm a Christian because I'm weak and I can admit I need a savior. I'm flawed, I'm imperfect, don't have it all together. Not an excuse for me to do stupid stuff, but I can point you to a place where you can find hope and redemption, and it's not me. So it's functioning in there, and then obviously being responsible and thinking through things before I just make decisions, because I know it affects more than just myself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you discovered, so you were a teen, right? Like 17, you started looking at your life and seeing things maybe weren't necessarily on the track you wanted them to be, but it was 19 when you became a Christian.
Right.
So talk to me a little bit about how that happened. How did you hear about Jesus, and how did you become a Christian?
My grandmother was very deep in the church, and when I would stay with her in California, it was there, but it wasn't predominant. I wasn't interested. It felt it was catered to her demographic and her age group and whatnot. So I just didn't see any need for it. I think my mother and her siblings felt similar, but they were raised by her, so they were inundated and felt like it was just too much for them. So my mother did not pressure me at all to be religious or have any kind of religious affiliation or orientation. So I was free to explore, and it was actually, in that exploration time when I really kind of started to panic because, I guess I would call myself an atheist, but then that scared me because the reality of atheism for me meant everything is purposeless, which means I have no purpose, which means nothing matters. And the thought that nothing matters really terrified me. So I said, whoa, 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 if nothing matters, what am I doing with my life?
Well, what is anybody doing with their life if nothing matters?
Why do I even wake up and eat? And so that terrified me. So that made me start searching and wrestling with, okay, who is the creator? Where's God? And Christianity was my last option. I was like, I'm not checking into that. That is
why? Why at the time? If you bring yourself back to there, why was it your last option?
It's grandma.
Yeah.
It's
old school.
It's
There's
old school. Yeah. It just. And all the presuppositions that I had, all of the portrayals of Christians in media and all those different things were just, I probably didn't know that was fueling my like disdain, but it was. And so I was like, all right, whatever, I'll do it. And what happened was I was on a college campus, and a friend of mine said, you need to come to Bible study. And to me, college meant being open-minded, trying new things, drugs or Christianity, whatever, and
the whole gamut, right?
Right. So I said, why not? I'll go to a Bible study. And I went, and I was really kind of blown away and humbled. I heard things I had never heard. I saw things I had never seen. People didn't look like grandma, they looked like me. And I was just blown away. And so I would revisit, and after a couple years, the message really impacted me and transformed me.
And so, you think back to that, where you were before that transformation, right? And then where you were immediately after and where you are now. What are some of the things that changed, the specific things that changed? I mean, you mentioned drugs, from then and now.
Well, from when prior to?
Prior, yeah.
Yeah, I think, I had no real sense of morality. It was all self-preservation. So they called me Crazy Cray. It was probably nothing I wasn't willing to do. I just really had no sense of morality. I remember there was a time period, and I said some very harsh and hateful things, and my mother confided in me that someone was sick, and I said, well, everybody's got to die one day. And it just crushed her because it was someone she really cared about. And I just remember being so harsh and just like, who cares, type of attitude. And just thinking that how callous I was, and now looking at how, my 5-year-old daughter just melts me. She sits in my lap and confides in me and tells me that her best friend in school is moving, and I'm like, oh, how do you feel? And I'm like, wow, this is a different person, like.
Is that weird still? I mean, it's years later, but is it weird to see the difference?
You know what, I think I've had my concept of what it means to be a man is so revolutionized that even there's an out-of-body experience sort of that says, man, that is weird. But then there's a comfortability that says, but it's me, what I mean? And so I'm comfortable in it now.
Was it a gradual process, like alcohol, drugs, things like that? Was that, I think a lot of Christians say, oh, I had this experience, I converted, and that was it. But I don't think that's the majority. I think the majority is people go through a process of change.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm still changing to this day, for every, major thing that I wrestled with historically. It was all brought about by there's all kind of different little, insecurities or different things that most of my wrestles are now more internal, but they're still the expression of them, the expression of the alcoholism or the drug abuse is rooted with the same issues that I have today. They're just expressed differently. So, now there still may be insecurities, or there still may be, angst or worry or anxiety or whatnot. It's just not, the solution isn't getting high. The solution now is, meditating on what I know is true, on what I know is true about God, and living in that reality.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so was it tough to get past the drugs and alcohol, though? Was that a huge barrier for you? I know some people struggle more than others.
It was huge. It was big. I mean, it definitely wasn't an overnight process. And I think for me, it was more about, the search for significance and satisfaction. And I was a hedonist, and I thought that my meaning derived from pleasure. And to me, when you come from a low-income environment, pleasure or escape, you can't, I mean, if you have a lot of money, pleasure or escape means going to the Bahamas and getting drunk if you don't have a lot of money, it's finding a drug that can take you out of your environment for a little while. And so
distraction.
Exactly.
Drugs are used as a distraction by so many people, right?
Yeah, I mean, you name your drug. Is it taking vacations every week and getting drunk on the islands, or which is more socially acceptable, or is it getting high? And so, it was difficult just to say, man, I gotta stop trying to escape. And it probably took me about 2 years really after becoming a Christian to really have some firm footing and feel like I'm consistent.
And now your family, who sort of watched this process, right? I mean, your family members who knew you before obviously know you now. What has that been like for them to see the transformation, and how has it impacted them?
Oh, they're blown away. I mean, they're blown away. I mean, initially I was obnoxious. I was the obnoxious, new convert.
Which I think a lot of Christians, I know Kirk Cameron, there's a lot of people who have talked about this sort of conversion, and then it's all they can talk about.
Right. And it's like that with anything. I think that's what people do. When people are convinced of something, they're obnoxious about it. It's when you come to New York and everyone thinks they know the best restaurant. They're there to proselytize you on this. No, you have to eat here or
Right,
their
no,
borough
exactly,
or
exactly,
whatnot. You know,
yeah.
it's what we do. If we're confident and excited about something, we proselytize people and we're passionate about it. And I was obnoxious, but I've become more gracious and more caring and responsible, and it's just a different person than they imagined I'd be. And some of it definitely attributed to, God working in my life, and some people attribute it to, man, you just grew up. So,
And you went to the University of North Texas, and what did you study there?
I studied electronic media and sociology, anthropology. So people and media.
Which is kind of what you're doing now.
It's kind of crazy. It worked out, I guess.
But now when you were in college, were you thinking this is what your path would be?
No, not even.
So what's it like now to look back and be like, okay, I had the #1 album in America last week, and now this is where I am, and that's where I was. What is that like for you?
I would blow my college mind if I could see into the future. Like my head would explode. Like there's a reason why, it took the time. I would never have imagined this. Never. I remember, prior to conversion, I remember thinking to myself, I know I'm gonna be some kind of rich executive, messing with my secretary, and that's just gonna be my life. And I loved it. I embraced that reality. I never would have imagined I'd be a family man and making music, and and it's cool because some of the things that I would have loved then are happening now, but there's a different meaning. So, having relationships with some of the best athletes in the world and greatest entertainers of our time would have meant the world to me then, and now I have some of those things, but I value them way differently than I would have then.
That's really interesting. And what was it for you, I guess, that you were like, okay, this is the moment where I know I'm going to go into hip hop and rap? Like, what was that moment, and what was it that sort of, and I guess the second piece of that question is, at what point did you realize this is really happening now and this is my career?
Yeah, it's for me, I mean, hip hop was a culture. Rapping was always something that I wanted to do, and I would do regardless. I would, if I was working in some kind of corporate situation, I would be the one guy who at the parties showed everybody he could rap. But the moment was really clear when my partner Ben and I were going to start the label, or he had actually started the label, and I was working for a cable company, and my mother was like, "Man, you have a salary, like a real salary. I'm so proud of you." And then I was like, "I'm going to leave and do music," and she literally was like, "Are you freaking kidding me?
Like, what are you doing?
You finally got a salary. Like you're out of my house.
Right.
Like, what are you doing?"
So she was scared.
Yeah.
Like any parent would be.
Sure.
Because it's a huge risk.
It was.
But I guess it's paid off.
Thank God.
It's an anomaly, right?
There you go. Look at you.
Now I'm plugging the album for you. When you think about anomaly, I guess let's go back there again. What is it that you want people to feel after they listen to this album?
I think it's a canvas of different emotions. I think, one, I want people to be comfortable being who God created them to be. And that's an uncomfortable place. It's embracing not your definition of who you should be, because I think that's kind of the other side of that, but it's really saying, man, who was I made to be? And can I be comfortable being that? Because I may not fully embrace that right now, today. But if this is who I'm supposed to be, then let me embrace that, and just feeling comfortable with that. Like I had to start realizing and being comfortable that even though I love hip hop and I love, hip hop culture, that a lot of the culture would not embrace me because of my faith, and I'm okay with that, just being okay with that, and realizing that because of my mission and vision, that a lot of Christian culture would not embrace me, but it's okay.
Again,
okay.
both ends. You're sort of
Right.
getting hit at both ends on this.
But I'm comfortable being me in running my race, and I just want people to find a sense of like, man, my position as far as God is concerned is never changed, regardless of how many people embrace me or how many people don't.
Why, in your view, is it important for everybody to figure out what their race is, what their mission is, what the end result of who God wants them to be is? Why is that essential for people?
I think it goes back to me wrestling with atheism, and because I think deep down inside everyone wrestles with a sense of worth or purpose. We want to matter. You know, we wake up every day wanting to matter, wanting to be significant. You know, we pursue relationships. We want to be loved, and I think all those things are great, but you know, without a redeemed perspective of them, you know, can get really warped. And you chasing significance, a young lady chasing significance in a warped way could lead to her being a prostitute, you know? And so I'm burdened for people to, one, understand they do matter, they do have purpose. Hopefully that drives them to say, well, wow, where was purpose given to me from? God, ultimately. And then say, well, what has He created me for? And what am I supposed to do? And let me do that, because that's what's going to give you real satisfaction in the long run.
And it's interesting because you could have people who have millions of dollars who have, you know, made it big, let's say in music, and that may not be where they really should be.
Right.
And that's a really weird thought. I think it's sort of countercultural to everything that we're taught in society to aspire to.
Yeah.
And that you may not be in your best position being there.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm a terrible somebody else, but I'm the best me they'll ever be. You know,
So, I mean, what you just said, you know, communicating that is what Christians have tried to do, and it's what the mission of, I think, Christianity is, to communicate the purpose of what God wants for people's lives. Where do Christians go wrong? I don't want to get you in trouble here, but where do Christians go wrong in popular culture, in media, in the way that they, and some of that's not Christian leaders' fault, sometimes it's the way they're portrayed, but where do they go wrong in getting this message out there?
Sometimes it's, you know, I think sometimes we, a lot of times we exist in our own bubble, our own kind of world, and we assume that everyone understands our language, our perspective, our paradigm, and so we come out of that bubble, you know, talking with those same kind of, using the same kind of terminology, language, thought process, and paradigms, not realizing that, you know, what's, you know, so simple in our minds is a very, you know, patronizing thought to other people, or condescending thought to other people. And just trying to understand and think through and process how other people relate and receive things. You know, it's almost as if I was to go to a foreign country and try to convince people of, I don't know, you name it, but whatever I believe, whatever philosophy of life I believe in, and I don't realize that this flies in the face of everything that they believe. And so now they're seeing me as condescending when I step in and I say the things that I say or do the things that I do. And I don't know if that's the most loving way to approach people or to approach the culture at large.
So what's next for you?
Man, you know, obviously I'm on tour, which is, you know, 2 months on the Anomaly tour, which is, you know, going to be intense. Involved in a film that really kind of encompasses a lot of what we're talking about, called Believe Me. Yeah, I would hopefully just like to be a voice in the culture, you know, and be able to have a seat at the table of, you know, what changes our society, what changes our world.
Absolutely. And you're doing that through your music and now a movie. So,
Yeah.
you know, Believe Me that you just brought up. Tell me a little bit about Believe Me. What's the plot? What's the, and I think it's an interesting film because it could spark some debate among you know, audiences. But tell me a little bit about it.
Yeah, I think Believe Me is really, it's a similar film to my existence. It's hard to categorize, you know, because it is a film that, you know, you want to say, oh, is it a Christian film or is it not a Christian film? And I think some people would say, oh, well, if it's PG-13, it must not be Christian. Or if it's made by Christians and has a redeeming kind of premise, then it must be Christian. But I think what the film is just honest. You know, it's an honest look at life from different lenses, you know, regardless of your faith or your background. And I think satire helps us to, it's funny. So you got Nick Offerman in there. It's a funny film, and I think satire allows us to look at our issues and laugh at them and realize that they're real issues. You know, I've seen people come to conclusions about, you know, society through satire, through comedy. It's like, oh, wow, that's true. You know, but you're laughing about it versus like, wait a minute, is that true? I don't know how I feel about that. You know, it's like I can laugh at it and move forward.
Do you think do you think some Christians will be offended by it? Or do
Yes.
And does that make you nervous?
No, because I think at the end of the day, you can't create art to exist in a safe place if the purpose of it is to be honest. Now, if you want to create art that is supposed to be categorized and targeted, then sure, you know, I want my Veggie Tales not explaining, you know, how babies are born.
Right.
You know, that's how I want my Veggie Tales. But if I want an honest look at culture that makes me think about life and society, then I want it honest. You know, the Bible did not exclude all the murders.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things in the Bible that, I mean,
Yeah.
and when I say this, people sort of, you know, get a little nervous, but there's a lot of things I wouldn't read to my child,
Yeah.
right? I mean, because they're describing things that were really difficult, they're hard subjects, and it's
Absolutely.
like, we'll talk about that when you're a teenager. We don't need to get into that now. Maybe even when
Absolutely.
you're in your 20s. Like, you know, it's tough stuff in the Bible, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, yeah, it's fascinating, the PG-13 piece, you know, that people might say, oh, no, I can't go see that. Well, you know, you can't make a movie, you know, about the Holocaust, and I'm not comparing, you know, believe me,
Sure.
but without, it can't be a PG movie. It's not a PG subject.
You can't do the life of David without the.
Right.
I mean, you couldn't do the life of Christ, the crucifixion of Christ, without
Exactly.
a hard rating. And I think at the end of the day, you're hard pressed, and I'm not saying this is an excuse, but you're hard pressed to find a Christian and say, hey, what's your favorite film, and it'd be rated G.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Because there's barely any rated G movies now to begin with. Is Frozen even rated G? I don't even know. I think
That's a good question. It
it's
might
got to
not
be, right?
Maybe.
I've seen it 150,000 times, so I should know. My
Yes,
daughter
you
watches
should.
it.
I've heard the
nonstop.
songs 250,000 times.
Let it go. Let it
Yes.
go. So the last question I guess I have for you is, you know, if you had an atheist in front of you, or a group of atheists, right, and I'm sure you've had them in front of you many times, but you had a chance to deliver to them one message, what would that message be?
One is, man, let's be friends. Like, can we hang out? Because I'm interested in hearing your view, your perspective, your thoughts. I think you're valuable. I think you have valuable thoughts. I don't patronize you or look down on you because we don't share the same belief system. Let's hang out. I think that for some reason we position ourselves as enemies. You know, it's kind of like, oh no, us versus them, and it's really no. If anything, it's us for them. I care about you, and if anything, if you want to hear my perspective, my perspective would really be a question for you. If there's no purpose, if there's no creator, and no purpose, and no rhyme or reason to the life that we're living, then why are we not acting consistent with that thought? Why do we treat ourselves as if we're purposeful? Or why, you know, Richard Dawkins would say, oh, I created my own purpose. Why would you do that? You know,
Oh, Richard Dawkins.
you know,
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question.
why would you create a purpose, like, based off of what makes you feel like you should do that?
I wonder if he'll see this and have an answer to that. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Well, okay, so where can people find more information about you, about the album, if they're interested?
Yes, you know, you can always go to Lecrae.com, and that's Lecrae, and it's all things album, social media. I'm on all the social media sites. Just
Yeah, you're big on Twitter.
Yes,
You like Twitter?
I do. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, Twitter's good stuff.
Yeah, Lecrae, Lecrae on Twitter as well, and anywhere you can buy music, the album is there.
Anomaly. The album's called Anomaly, right?
And the album's called Anomaly. The film, believe me, is in theaters. You know, depending on when this airs, but you know, it'll probably be in theaters by the time you watch this.
Very good. Very good. Well, listen, thank you so much for coming down.
Absolutely, honored.